Hi there. So with everyone currently in a bit of lockdown, a lot of people are doing more running. Now, I don't know if you know this, but the vast majority of people every year who do regular running end up getting injured. So I thought I'd do a video just showing you some common problems with running and where they're coming from. It's not very well understood, and of course this has got everything to do with gait and posture. Because everyone's got their little idiosyncrasies with gait and posture, and they'll give you some quite familiar problems, so you'll have a lot in common with other people who have similar gait issues and postural issues. So I'm going to go through a few of those in this little session. Now of course there could be a lot of things wrong with you. Some of them could be genetic, so not all of these are going to be particularly for you, but they're worth watching out for, because if you do have certain pains in certain areas that I'm going to highlight, there might be something you can do about them. And certainly if you look at my other videos, the self-massage and the postural exercises, that will all come in very helpful. So the first problem I'm going to talk about is bad knees. Runner's knee, obviously a lot of people get bad knees when they run. Now if you're getting pain at the front of the knee here as you run, it could very well be down to how you're holding yourself in your posture. So I'll give you an example. If you're getting pains in your knee, or perhaps even at the front of your foot, right down at the bottom here, or even in around the foot itself, anywhere around the foot area, it could have a bit to do with the fact that you're shifting your pelvis. Now, so what is a shift of the pelvis? So, well, it just depends really. You've got lateral shifts this way, and then you've got a posterior shift, which would be this way. That one's kind of difficult to do, but the most common kind of shift that people have is an anterior shift. So an anterior shift looks a bit like this. It's often caused by tight hip flexors, but what happens basically is your hip flexors are tight, so they pull you into this position here, into a shift. So as you can see, I'm not stacked very well here, so my head and my upper body is actually kind of above my feet, and obviously this is going to cause a problem for your knees. So your knees are optimally stacked here, they've moved and shifted forward like this, so you're going to be putting a lot more pressure on your knees and your feet in an anterior shifting position. Some people are way out here, so if you're running with this shift, you're going to be pushing down forward on this knee and putting a lot of pressure on this knee. Now it won't be as obvious as this. When I'm shifting here and pushing my knee forward, it's not going to be that obvious when you do it, but it's worth thinking about. So a lot of the previous videos have been about finding a neutral spine, using those postural exercises and the myofascial release, which is the self-massage. So basically we want to get you from here back to here, and then if you run with this kind of posture instead, you're much more likely when you push off for your knee not to be pushing forward. You're not getting that shearing force on the front of your knee, or indeed all the force on the front of your feet. Now another problem with this shift as well is it might not only just cause problems at the knees, but it will also switch off your glutes to a large degree. So you're going to be placing more pressure on your hamstrings, but particularly your calves and your Achilles here. So if you're getting sore calves after a run particularly, you might find that has quite a bit to do with an anterior shift, or it might also be caused by an anterior tilt. This one's an anterior tilt, looks a bit like that. So this is a shift. So obviously my hips have shifted forwards. A tilt is like that. So if I pull my shirt here, you can see that curve in my lower spine. And so it's more likely that you're going to get the sore hamstrings or the sore calves with the posterior tilt, because I think your knees and your feet may give out first if you're shifting forwards. There's a lot of forces going through those knees. So just watch out for that in your posture. So have a look at yourself in the mirror just kind of relax a little bit and then see how you hold yourself. So I hold myself with a slight rounding of the shoulders and a bit of a anterior tilt, and you can correct that by squeezing the shoulder blades back, taking a deep breath, posteriorly tilting your pelvis to get a neutral spine. I have other videos on that you can look at though, but just watch that, see how you are in the mirror. It's not easy to correct when you're running itself. That's something that might be a bit more complex, that you might need to see someone, like someone who is a biomechanics specialist like myself, and you can sort that out. But it's just something to be wary of if you are feeling those problems where I say in the knees and the feet, anterior shift. If you've got sore calves, particularly after a run, it may have also something to do with an anterior tilt and possibly a shift as well. Okay, so I've already talked about the anterior shift, but let me go into a little bit more detail on the anterior tilt. So if I squeeze my shirt here and just let myself get into an anterior tilt, if you're running with this anterior tilt, it's very likely that you're going to get a bit of a sore lower back. So we need to get rid of that anterior tilt like that. So we've got anterior, posterior tilt. So we need to get rid of that anterior tilt to get a neutral spine. So if you've got a sore lower back, very likely that that's why. Now, often comes with an anterior tilt is that you'll move the top of your body forward as you run. And obviously, with your head, with the forwards of your lower back, you're going to be putting pressure on this part of your lower back. So that's something to look out for there. Now, another thing that this can cause is if you have issues with your gait, you might find yourself running on a bit of a line instead of running hip width apart. So if I just come back a little bit here and show you, we've got quite a nice floor for this little demonstration. So if I walk for you nice and straight, how you should walk, you might see what I mean. So if you look at these two tram lines on the floor, I'm just going to walk, get a good posture, and walk on the tram lines. Now that really is how you should be walking. So the feet should be pointing forwards, the knees should be pointing forwards, and you should be staying hip width apart. Now too often people actually don't walk or run like this, so they'll run more on a line. So instead of going through the tram lines here hip width apart, we're going to walk on this line and just see what happens at around about the hip area. And this is often caused by that anterior tilt of the pelvis because of the tight hip flexors. It causes a lot of these problems. Now I won't go into it in too much detail here, but it causes a lot of these problems elsewhere, and this will often stops you. For example, if you have this anterior tilt of the pelvis, it makes you, and shift often, it makes you want to hunch forward in your upper body. And if you do this, you can't rotate very well up here. So you tend to rotate a little bit in your lower spine and your hips. And this causes you to walk on a bit of a line. So if you watch what happens when I do it, if I try and walk on a line here, you might notice that my hips are going a little bit from side to side. Now this may I know this happens in a lot of people's gaits when I watch them run. So when I go down to the beach and then go for a run myself, or if I take a walk along the beach, I see people doing this a lot. So I see a lot of this motion in their lower spine and hips. So it's not only bad for the back, it's also bad for the hips. So if you've got stiff hips after a run, which is something I used to really suffer from when I ran, stiff hips and stiff ankles were my problem when I ran. This is often down to the fact that you're running on a line rather than running hip width apart, and then shifting that weight from one foot to the next like that. So you should be shifting your weight as you run rather than everything staying in the center. So that's just something to watch out for as well. Hip width apart. If you follow some of the postural exercises on my YouTube channel, you'll be able to see how to achieve that. Okay, the next running problem you may have is sore ankles. So if you're sore on the outside of the ankle here, or even just going around just to the front in that area, watch out for this. So what I notice in a lot of people is when they go up on a calf raise, they'll often supinate their ankles. So what do I mean by this? So if you look at me in the mirror here, or sorry, if you look at me from behind, I'm going to go up into a calf raise and supinate in the calf raise. So if you have a look here, I'm going to go up in the calf raise and supinate. So as I supinate, you can see there that my ankles are going to head out to the side a little bit. Now, as you can imagine, if you do this unconsciously without knowing it, and a lot of people do, because I see a lot of people doing it, a lot of clients doing it, then every time that you run, you're going to push off and subtly supinate your ankles. So instead of pushing off nice and straight, you're going to push off with that supination each time. And then again, over the miles and miles of running that you do, and walking as well, this is going to start to build up some problems on the outside of the ankle. So if this is something you're experiencing, it may be a lot to do with that ankle supination. Now, as with a lot of these postural problems that come up, and gait problems that people have, it's not a simple fix. There's no simple fix just for your ankle. The problem at your ankle is often happening, is caused by stuff happening elsewhere. Typically, it's those tight hip flexors that are usually the responsible right at the beginning, so they pull you out into this position. Then you have to round to compensate, and then once you round, you can't rotate up here, so you rotate down here, and then you rotate your ankles. So it's travelled up and then it's travelled down. So it's not a easy fix for these problems, but at least you may be aware of what you're doing, and you might be able to test this by just doing this exercise, finding someone to look at you or filming yourself if you've got these ankle problems. So just put your hands on the wall, lean slightly to the wall, and then just go up into a strong calf raise. And just calf raise as high as you can, because the more intense the exercise, the more it shows up the problems. So go up as high as you can, and then see what's happening with your ankles. And if you've got that supination and you've got the ankle pain, well, it's very likely that's the cause. Now, you can go about fixing it. Obviously, look at my other videos for this, but I'll show you a particular exercise that you can do for this. So again, this same position, you have to sort your posture out first. So it's a big deep breath, squeeze the shoulder blades together, big deep breath, posterior tilt, get your posture into good alignment before you start. Then onto the wall, so make sure your posture's good, go up into the calf raise, and then if you're doing this supination, what I want you to do is try and raise your little toes as you go up in the calf raise. So supination and then raise your little toes, and you should get a lot straighter when you do this. And that exercise, along with some other postural exercises, if you do them quite regularly, almost every other day, 3 or 4 sets of up to 30 seconds just holding it, you don't need to hold it for very long, we might be able to begin sorting that problem out. It's more complex, again, than just doing that one exercise though. You may have to do a bit of self-massage, myofascial release, and other postural exercises to get it so that you're pushing off nice and straight instead of this weird push off to the side. Because as you can imagine, you want all of your energy pushing you up against gravity and forwards in your gait as you run. You don't want energy lost out to the side. Not only is the energy lost, so you're going to get more tired more quickly, but also just on a purely physics problem, if you've got a lot of force going out this way as you run, as you're pushing off, well then it's not going to be very good for your joints, is it? And it's just common sense in that way. What you also might find, like I said, because you're being very inefficient by supinating your ankles out to the side here, your calves, you might find that your calves get pretty stiff and a bit of a problem. So even if you don't have these ankle problems, if you get a lot of fatigue in your calves when you run, this might be worth checking on as well. So just keep those ones in mind.